Hello, I'm Dave and this is Logan, out once again for a walk in the countryside. Thanks for joining us. Now today we're at the pretty village of Broad Chalke in Wiltshire. It's located about 8 miles west of Salisbury, and we're going to be walking a roughly 6-mile circular route, starting off with a wander through the village, and there's lots to see and explore there. And then we'll be heading northeast along a byway up to a ridge above Little Down. We'll then head west along an ancient drover's track at the top of the ridge to Compton Down, at which point we make our return journey south back to the village. And there should be some amazing views and some very interesting things to see along the way. Now I'm filming right at the end of March. At the moment the sun is out. It might cloud over a little bit later. It's about 5-6 degrees, so Logan's still got his fleece on at the moment, and there is a bit of a wind, but hopefully it'll warm up a bit later. Should be perfect conditions for a walk. Do come along with us. Well, before we head out into the countryside, let's have a little wander through the village. Broad Chalke itself is sort of split in two by the River Ebble, so we'll have a look at the southern side first. And back in 2021, it appeared in a list compiled by the Sunday Times of the top 50 places to live in the UK. I think it was number 18 in the charts. And let's see why. Starting off sort of at the western end of the village, and look at this butler's farmhouse. It really is quite beautiful. Obviously the thatch being restored. Now this house here I think used to be a shop called J.E. Fry and Son. It closed about 10 or 11 years ago, but it had been established for something like 170 years. Now this amazing house here is called Reddish House, and there was a house on the site way back in the 16th century, but this house was built in the early 18th century, and it's had quite a few famous residents over the years, including Toyah Wilcox and her husband Robert Fripp. I think they lived here between 1987 and 1999. And this splendid house is the King's Old Rectory, and the gatehouse next to it, I think. And it has origins from the 15th century. It was once owned by the Abbess of Wiltshire and was handed to Henry VI, who then gave it to King's College, Cambridge, who I think still owned it right up until 1921. Oh, isn't that quite exquisite? Corner cottage with the thatch. Beautiful. Now I've just come down Bull's Lane, and I think this was the old vicarage, a flint house now called Hill House, built in 1860. I think it ceased to be the vicarage after the Second World War. And this is the village hall. I was reading that originally it was a reading room built on the site of a double cottage. The hall was opened in 1911, and there were improvements in the 1960s and 1979. It was refurbished again in 2004. Now, as far as the history of the village is concerned, way back in the 10th century, an estate called Chalke was granted to Wilton Abbey. And that included most of which became Broad Chalke and another village to the southwest of here. As the largest village in the Chalke estate, it was known as Great Chalke in the 13th century. Most of the land around here is actually chalk downland. Well, the next thing to look at is the church, which as you can see is just behind me. And it's the Church of All Saints. Now there's a record of a Saxon preaching cross in the village dating to the 9th century, and there was probably a wooden church here before this one was built in 1280, although it's thought that work started as early as 1258. The nave, chancel and north transept are from the 13th century, and the south transept, south porch and tower are from the 14th century. It's also got a north vestry. I think it's got 8 bells. Okay, well, we'll have a little peep inside. And there's an octagonal font stone, quite splendid. And wow, look at this for a stained glass window on the left here. That is quite beautiful, especially with the morning sunshine coming through. And just towards the chancel end, looks like there's some refurbishments going on, so we can't see around the back, as it were, but there's the pulpit on the right. And then I know a lot of people like to see the kneelers, so we'll have a little look down there. And then just one final pan round, looking back, and there's a quite splendid wooden ceiling. Look at those beams, they really are quite terrific. I'm now just making my way along a little footpath to the north of the church. We get our first glimpse of the River Ebble over to the left. We'll be crossing that shortly. Now, I think there was a mill and a pub at this end of the village at some stage. The mill fell into disrepair in 1858, and the pub, which I think was called the Angel Inn, was closed and demolished in 1866. Now, just looking over onto the other side of the river there, if you look at an old 1901 map, it shows that there were watercress beds here. There were still watercress beds today to the west of the village at an area called the Marsh. The industry started here in 1889, and the cress was picked and sent to London by train. I think there were stations at Dinton and Wilton to the north, so I wonder if they used them. And they still grow a dark variety of cress today. So we're leaving the sort of southern end of the village and heading to the north, and this is the Causeway Bridge, which takes us over the River Ebble. The river's 12 miles long, and it rises at Alvediston, not far from here to the west, and flows east to join the River Avon, about 2.5 miles southeast of Salisbury. Well, now we're onto the northern side of the river, and this is the Queen's Head, built in the early 19th century and open as a pub called the Queen's Head at least as early as 1855, 1865, and it was refurbished in 2023, and I expect it'll be our final destination. Well, just along from the pub is the old Congregational Chapel, and it shows on a 1901 map. Originally built in 1801, but it was then replaced by a new church in 1862. In 2006 it was refurbished and divided to provide a community room, and then in 2012 the village shop and post office moved in. I think it's still got services though. See, there's a little sign that says chapel round the back, and I think it's called the United Reformed Church. I'm not 100% sure. Now, this is interesting because when I was doing my research, I came across this old photo on the internet. Well, I'll put it up on screen, but you can see there's a house on the left and also on the right. And I thought, well, I'll see if I can find the exact spot today. And here it is. Well, the old thatch building on my right has gone, and that's been replaced. But the actual house called Sun Cottage is still here. And just next to Sun Cottage, down Chapel Lane, this sort of white building here. Now this used to be a shop called Bailey's. I think it's now called Holy Cottage. And again, I found a lovely old picture on the internet that showed it when it was a shop, and that the building on the right behind it, I think, was the old bakehouse. I was chatting to a lovely chap who lives in the village who was telling me all about it. What a quite beautiful village. Okay, well, we're now going to head out into the countryside, heading in a sort of northeasterly direction, probably going to be going uphill. And the clouds have arrived. Fingers crossed we're not going to get any rain today. Another little update on the route. So there's the village in the far distance there, and somewhere down in the valley is the River Ebble, and then the fields being prepared for seeds by the looks of things. And then, so this is looking over to the east. So we're going to follow a footpath that's basically going to take us along the side of this field, and then it should join up with a byway, and that'll take us north. Well, if that isn't a sign that spring is on its way. A field of yellow. I haven't seen that for a few months. Now, do you think it's warm enough to take your coat off now? I think so. He's feeling very proud of himself at the moment because, well, 2 weeks ago, he was at Crufts at his last ever dog show, and he got a 5th place out of 12 in his class. If you haven't seen the video that we did of his day out, do check it out. Haha. Now, I think this is the byway. So this is where we definitely start heading north. And I think we follow this track for quite a while. I just made my way through a farm. I think it's called Stoke Farm. Doesn't appear on a 1958 map. All the buildings look quite new. But continuing to head northwards. I'm quite lucky. I thought I was in trouble because I've been using my Insta 360 Ace Pro camera, which I've been very pleased with. And I needed to change the battery, and I always take a spare battery. Except I managed to leave it at home. Fortunately, I've got my spare camera, the GoPro 10, with a couple of batteries, so I'm using that now. I was lucky because I don't always bring that with me. Well, I'll tell you now, the sun's come back out. Really get some quite stunning scenery. I'm just going up the side of this valley. I love the way the shapes and the contours really come out with some of the shadows there. Whew, getting quite warm now. It's all this uphill walking. Now, where I am now, if you look on a 1901 map, there was some old farm buildings, old Stoke farm buildings, I think, but looks as though they've long gone, no sign of them now. Now, as I'm continuing to head northwards, a few folk have been asking how my younger dog Fiver is getting on. He's appeared on a few videos. He's going great. He's 3 years old now. He's done a little bit of showing. In fact, he qualified for Crufts when he was a puppy, but his main thing that he does is competitive obedience, and this year he'll be competing in novice classes throughout the summer, and also during the winter both he and I do canicross trail runs. We do about 6 or 7 over the winter, and we have a lot of fun doing that. not very far. We usually always do the 5k or 10k. In fact, last week we did a 10k trail race at the Queen Elizabeth Country Park near Petersfield, and it was hilly and very muddy as well. I think the first sort of 25 minutes was uphill all the way, but oh well, it keeps us fit. And I've now made my way onto this sort of dead straight old drove. It's the old Shaftesbury drove, an old ancient drover's route, well, from Salisbury to Shaftesbury, and it's been in use since the 11th century. And basically it's because, well, being high up here, it's very much dry above the wet valley below. I think it was actually a turnpike road in 1762, and then the lower road in the valley to the north became turnpiked in 1787 or 1788 and took over, and that is now the A30. Well, just as we're making our way along this old drover's route, there's some terrific views. This is looking over to the north, very much your typical rolling Wiltshire landscape. Everything looking so fresh. Really is quite beautiful. Well, I'm continuing to make my way along this drover's route, and just where it does a little bend, if you look on a 1901 map, it shows there's a couple of buildings and a pond called the Compton hut. There's nothing here now. It looks like it's demolished, and there's a few sort of bricks and masonry about. But it used to be a small inn, probably just a beer house. And there's another one called the Fovant hut, which is further along. In fact, the building's still there. It's now residential. But the beer house here was actually featured in the Police Gazette on the 8th of July 1774, when several men from Broad Chalke broke into the cellar and stole 30 gallons of strong beer, cheeses and bushels of malt. Well, it's a shame there isn't a beer house today, because so a pint of ale would have been just about right. Anyway, we need to carry on heading westwards. More stunning views. Might not be coming out so well on the camera, of course, but trust me, it's something special. That's over to the south. Glorious yellow on the gorse there. And then, so we're continuing westwards along the track, and then this is over to the right. And crops out there really coming on, looking quite lush and green. Okay, well, we are going to sort of continue heading westwards down that way, but before we do, I'm going to make a little detour to the north. I want to follow this track. There's something I want to see if I can find. I'll keep our fingers crossed we can find it. Incidentally, just over beyond, just behind those trees, there is a trig point, but it's on private land, so we're not going to be able to bag that one today. Oh, I know I keep going on about these views, but it's one of those walks where you just have to keep stopping every so often just to take it all in. And of course, the trees yet to have their leaves, so they have their own little characteristics to themselves, don't they, with the patterns of the branches. And so this is looking over to the west. Right folks, this is where we come to what I hope will be a very interesting part of the walk. Now where I am now, the land is public access, restricted, quite difficult to get to. There are no stiles as far as I can see. Now what I'm looking for is right at the top of that hill, and there is a little note that's asking us to keep dogs on leads as well. Right, let's go. Well, we've made it. Now you're probably wondering, what on earth have I brought you all the way up the side of virtually a mountain in a gale force wind to show you this? Well, this, believe it or not, is a map of Australia carved out into the side of a hill. So why is it here? Well, hopefully you can hear me above this wind. Back at the start of the First World War, on land near Compton, Chamberlain to the north, there was a large military camp. I think it was called Herdcut Camp. And in 1917, Australian troops that were based here actually came up here, and well, they took the example of other chalk carvings at nearby Fovant Down, and they carved out this tremendous map of Australia on the northern side of Compton Down. Of course, further west from here you've got the Fovant badges, and I think 5 of the 8 originals still survive. The others have been added over the decades, and the original set of badges were regimental badges, say cut into the chalk hill at Fovant Down, created by soldiers in 1916 and 1917 that were based at garrisons nearby that were waiting to go off to France. Well, that was fun. Well worth the effort. Nice to get out of that wind though. I suppose, well, the best place to actually view the map is probably down in the valley by the main road, the A30, and then look at it looking towards the south. But I'll try and put up some photographs of some aerial shots. Right, well, we need to now head back to the track that will then take us back up onto the ridge, and then we can join up with that Drovers Road again. Okay, the wind has got up again. Now, this is where we leave the old Shaftesbury Drove. That carries on straight ahead, and we turn left and start heading southwards on the homeward journey, which hopefully will be downhill all the way. Well folks, we've made it back to Broad Chalke and the Queen's Head, which we've visited purely for research purposes for the video. And just testing out their ale. Oh yes, very nice it is too. And we've got some Piper's Crisps, which of course is Logan's favourite. We hope you enjoyed the walk today. If you did, please do give us a thumbs up and a like, and do leave a comment, and do check out our Facebook page, Dave's Countryside Walks. So until we meet again, thanks for watching, and cheerio. Another crisp, sir?